Hi, everyone. Good morning. This is Rosemary Koo, Chief Medical Officer of United Ag, and thank you so much for joining our health chats this morning. Given the holiday season, most of us are probably concerned about our eating habits, especially with all the delicious food and gatherings going on. So it seemed timely to focus this month's health chats on how to improve your eating habits. Before we get started, I would like to thank our sponsors, which are Blue Shield of California, Elite Medical, Gallagher, and Cyan. So today we're going to be talking about a number of nutrition hot topics. I'll also go through some general principles of eating, healthy eating that should apply to most of you. I'll also go over our United Ag resources, and I'll leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. So to start off with, one of the biggest hot topics that I've been getting questions about in nutrition is intermittent fasting. This has certainly been a growing trend over the last several years, so it's not new, but almost everyone I've been talking to about their food has been asking about intermittent fasting. And so what is intermittent fasting? It's essentially eating within a certain constrained time window. And what that does is prolong your fasting window throughout the day. And ultimately, that allows your body to use up your glucose stores, start tapping into your fat stores. It can improve blood glucose levels, insulin levels, and also help with weight loss. Also, it can simplify eating patterns if you know you're only going to eat within a certain time window. So the most common structure of intermittent fasting is usually a 16-hour fasting window and then an 8-hour eating window. So how that typically works out to be is like, say you only eat between noon to 8 p.m. or maybe 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and then fast the rest of the time. There are other forms of intermittent fasting, though, where people will actually do a whole 24-hour fast, usually about once a week. Or there are other formats where you're eating normally for 5 days a week, and then 2 days of the week interspersed between those normal eating days are lower calorie days. So there are a lot of different formats, but as I mentioned, the 16-hour fasting window with an 8-hour eating window is usually the most common. And while there are the health benefits that I just talked about, there are a few cons, so it might not be suitable for everyone. The first con is that because the eating window is shifted up a bit, starting at probably around 10 or noon, and you might be skipping breakfast, it could actually impact your sleep cycle. Our sleep cycle is very much tied to the timing of our eating, actually. And so the later we eat throughout the day, it might be harder to fall asleep. And so our sleep actually might be moved up a bit as well. So if you're already having sleep issues, having trouble falling asleep at night, this might not be the best option for you. It can also cause fatigue and added stress, especially if the eating window is quite different from your normal eating schedule. Also, if you've ever had a history of disordered eating, this may not be a good option for you as well. And the main point here is that you should really honor your own eating schedule. So if you're someone who feels good about skipping breakfast and you tend to eat later, then this might be a great option for you because it basically is kind of like a more tuned in version of whatever you're already doing. You might just want to shorten the eating window so you're not eating as late at night. However, if you're someone who needs breakfast, if you don't feel good without something in your stomach first thing in the morning, you're nauseous, you can't do an early morning exercise routine because you haven't eaten, intermittent. But like I said, there's a lot of pros and cons about this eating style, and it can certainly have a lot of great health benefits for the right person. The next nutrition hot topic that I'm going to be talking about is carbs. Now, the pendulum swings about carbs back and forth all the time. There's been lots of trends around keto diets, which are very low carb. And then there's the Mediterranean diet, which is actually more lenient on carbs. And so there are a lot of different nutritional approaches that have a very wide range of carbs associated with them. But the important thing to realize is that not all carbs are created equal. So the carbs that are sugars or highly refined grains, like a lot of white flour, so like your Wonder Bread or your cookies that have a lot of sugar and white flour in them, those carbs are not really healthy carbs because they're really just calories. Yes, your body can use them as fuel, but there's really not a whole lot of fiber or vitamins or other nutrients going along with those kinds of foods. And there are a lot of healthy carbs, though, in fruits and vegetables. And yes, there's still sugar in fruit, and some sugar in vegetables, actually. At least you're getting a lot of fiber, a lot of vitamins and nutrients along with those types of foods. And also with whole grains, you're also getting vitamins and nutrients as well, and fiber. And so not all carbs are created equal. The ones that are worse for you are the highly refined carbs, including sugars and highly refined grains like white flour. Now, that being said, there are a lot of hidden sugars in food that you might want to watch out for. And these are carbs that you really don't need, but they might not be apparent to you in the foods that you're eating. So for instance, sugar-sweetened beverages can hide a lot of sugar in them. And while they taste sweet, you might not realize that one sugary beverage, like one soda or one sugary latte from Starbucks, could actually push you over your sugar limit for that day. That's crazy to think about, that one beverage could be more than your entire day's worth of sugar. So beverages are a big place where a lot of sugar can hide, and it can be very easy to get out of your diet too. You can always switch out soda for sparkling water, or grab a coffee with a little bit of milk or cream in it instead of one of those sugary lattes. Sauces and thickeners, thickeners meaning like cornstarch or potato starch, can hide a lot of carbs or sugar in food. If you've ever looked at the nutrition labels of some pasta sauces, such as tomato sauce or barbecue sauce, it's pretty staggering how much sugar can be in some of these condiments or sauces. And so, take some time to look at those nutrition labels, not only on the carbs, but the amount of added sugars, and take a look at the ingredients too, to see if maybe there's some thickeners in there or ingredients that you actually can't pronounce or don't recognize. Those are foods that you want to kind of stay away from or just have in moderation. Lastly, with carbs, there's a great marketing ploy out there, which gets us to think that we're buying healthier food than it actually is the net carbs approach on marketing. And basically, this is on a lot of bread products that I've seen, tortillas, even some dessert type foods, where it'll be marketed as a health food because the net carbs are low. And what most of these foods have done is add fiber to the food itself. So they basically say a net carb is the total carbs minus the fiber in the food. So if they add more fiber, then it actually reduces the quote unquote net carbs. But that actually doesn't make the food any healthier. That's like saying if I have a slice of cake and eat a stick of celery with it, then it's healthier. And that doesn't actually make sense physiologically. So watch out for the net carbs marketing on packaged foods. It doesn't always mean that that food is actually healthier. The next topic I want to talk about is eating for your gut. So we often think of, our food is just feeding ourselves, or if you're pregnant, you might think of, it's feeding yourself and the baby. But what we don't, often remember is that what we're eating is actually also feeding our gut microbiome. And our gut microbiome is so critical for our body's immune system functioning, decreasing inflammation, helping to control our metabolism and cardiovascular factors. And our gut microbiome is actually, we're learning more about how it impacts our brain chemistry as well. And so your gut can actually impact your mental health, your ability to handle stress, and how well you're thinking and how well your memory is. Um, so the health of your gut microbiome really determines the health of your whole entire body and your emotional well-being as well. And so you're not eating just for yourself, you're eating for your gut. And if you treat your gut microbiome well, it'll actually help keep you healthy. It's one that has a lot of diverse, healthy bacteria where there's no overgrowth of any unhealthy bacteria. And the most important principles to keep your gut healthy is to have a lot of plant-based dietary fiber. This fiber is actually what feeds the gut microbiome. And studies have shown that the higher fiber diets actually lead to a greater diversity of gut microbiomes. So you have a greater range of types of bacteria in your gut, of the good bacteria that develop when you have more of this dietary fiber. Also, try to get in some probiotics. These are foods that have healthy bacteria already in them. Yogurt, kefir are great examples. Anything that's been cultured. So kimchi is great, that's been fermented. And also, if you can find pickles that are naturally fermented so that they're not sour just from vinegar, but they're actually sour from the fermentation process, those are all great sources of probiotics. Some people also stand by taking probiotic supplements. There's certainly a range of quality of probiotic supplements. My stance is usually it's best to get probiotics and dietary fiber from your real food instead of the supplements themselves. Also, your gut is impacted by your lifestyle as well. So things like sleep deprivation, lack of exercise, and high stress can also impact how your gut functions. And then lastly, it's really important to avoid unnecessary antibiotics. So if your doctor tells you to take antibiotics, you should absolutely take them and finish the course. But sometimes, say you have a sinus infection, and I've seen this a lot in the clinic, is, say you have a sinus infection and your doctor says, well, most likely it's not bacterial. Most likely it's a viral infection and you'll clear it on your own. Some people still ask for antibiotics in that case. And if that's you, take a moment and think about, what are actually the pros and cons of taking these antibiotics when your doctor is telling you that you don't need them. The cons are actually you could build resistant strains of the bad bacteria that's causing the infection. And you could also kill off a lot of the good bacteria in your body, not just in your gut, but also elsewhere on your body as well. And so it's best to avoid antibiotics unless your doctor tells you that you need them. And then I do want to touch on eating habits and alcohol, especially during this time of year. Since there's a lot of alcohol at social events, it's really important if you're trying to eat healthier is to actually limit your alcohol consumption. And that's because alcohol increases overall food consumption. So studies have shown that if you're drinking alcohol and eating, you tend to eat at least 30% more. And if you look at your personal life on the times where you've been eating and drinking at the same time, you might notice you actually eat more than 30% more. And that has that's based actually in the way your brain functions and how your brain reacts to alcohol. So alcohol impacts some brain chemicals, including ghrelin, and it can also impact other hormones like leptin, which actually increase your appetite overall. And it also increases cravings for high fat, high caloric foods. And so you are more apt to pick the foods that are less healthy for you. And then it actually impacts your judgment. So you're less likely to say no when that food is around. This is like basically a triple whammy with alcohol and eating habits. So if you're trying to eat healthy, it's really best to moderate your alcohol intake so that you're not tempted to have these unhealthy foods. And then I just want to touch upon mindfulness and eating. When most people are asking about eating tips, or you've probably read this online, is that many of the resources talk about being mindful when you're eating. But what does that actually mean? And these are basically the 4 principles that I think of when I think of mindfulness and eating. The first one is hunger signals. And what that means is you have to develop an awareness of how hungry you are. And if you're hungry, you should eat. And if you're not hungry, you can wait a little while. But you also want to realize that if you're starting to get hungry and you delay eating, then you're more likely to eat more later on. And so you have to tune into your own body to understand what is the appropriate hunger level, what are the signs that you're getting hungry, and when you should eat in response to that. A lot of us, especially if our day to day is very go, 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 we actually have trained ourselves to ignore these hunger signals. And then we don't eat until we're ravenously hungry. And that's not good for your body either. Also, another component of mindfulness is understanding why you're eating. So are you truly hungry? Are you following your hunger signals? Or maybe you're eating because you're actually thirsty. Maybe you're dehydrated and you actually need water instead of food. Or perhaps you're eating out of stress, or maybe eating out of boredom. And so tuning into understanding what's triggering your eating behaviors can help you develop healthier habits. Also, avoiding a blackened mindset is incredibly helpful. So try to avoid thinking of certain foods as good or bad. The labels actually don't help. Instead, remember that food is just food, and it's really more about the impact of how your body and mind respond to the certain foods. So instead of kind of labeling the food, can you figure out what foods actually make you feel better or worse? And I like to actually give this example of the mother of one of my physician colleagues. So one day she was telling me how her mom has had a history of really poor memory. They were worried about her becoming disabled, having dementia, and having all of these body aches and arthritis going on. And then the mom started getting rid of sugar and gluten in her diet. And within weeks, she started feeling better. Now, this isn't to say that everyone needs to get rid of all sugar and gluten in their diet to feel better, but for this individual, that made a huge difference in how she felt. And so how can we kind of tune in to how our foods are impacting us? Because I guarantee you, if you start looking at how your foods impact your daily functioning, energy levels, digestion, mental clarity, you're probably going to start seeing some patterns there. And so the focus is really more on eating more of the foods that make you feel better instead of telling yourself, oh, I can't have that. Because for most of us, if we say we can't have something, that's the first thing we want to have. And then I'm going to jump into some general healthy principles that pretty much apply to everyone. Now, a healthy diet is very personal, but for most people, these principles would work. So the first thing is to avoid trans fats. Fats in general are pretty controversial topics between saturated fats, unsaturated fats. Keto is a high fat diet. There are a lot of low fat diets out there as well. But putting aside all that controversy, the one thing that nutritionists generally agree on is that trans fats are bad. They're labeled separately out on the nutrition label, and these have been shown to put people at greater cardiovascular risk. So avoid the trans fats. A lot of fast food restaurants, you might not actually know if there's trans fats in the food because a lot of fried food actually has trans fats in it, but it might not be labeled out appropriately. And so when you're eating fast food, just be careful of some of the fried foods because some of the fats they use do have trans fats in them. Also, you'll want to minimize processed foods. These are the foods typically have the most sugar and refined carbohydrates that aren't good for you. They have a lot of additives that could actually impact your gut microbiome as well. And prioritize non-starchy vegetables and whole foods. So these are kind of like the opposite of processed foods. Processed foods tend to be, the packaged foods already prepared for you that end up having a lot of preservatives in them. But non-starchy vegetables and whole foods are like the whole version of the food. So, have the whole piece of fruit instead of the juice, or, grab the ingredients to make the food at home instead of getting a pre-made frozen meal. The more whole the version of the food that you buy, the more whole the ingredient that you buy, the least processed it'll be, the more you know what's actually going into your food. As we mentioned, you want to avoid excessive alcohol, and planning ahead is generally a very good principle to help you make better eating choices. If you know you're going to need to have a snack to avoid making an unhealthy choice later on, plan to have that snack on hand. If you're going to a dinner party, but it's a little bit later, and you don't want to overeat 2 hours in advance. So plan ahead will help you avoid those situations where you're tempted to have foods that aren't really good for you. And then also, I do want to emphasize that the best eating plan for you can be very different from someone that you might know. And where I think people get into traps with their eating is they try to follow either a fad diet or what's worked for someone else. So say your neighbor has done really well on keto, and so you want to try keto as well. But if your body doesn't do well, if you actually start feeling uh, worse energy levels, if your mental health suffers on a very low carb diet, that might not be great for you. And so your diet needs to take into consideration your health, meaning like any health conditions that you might have, such as diabetes or hypertension or mental health concerns. It also needs to take into account your personal preferences. You shouldn't have to try to eat foods you don't like, and there should be room in your diet for foods that you do like. And then lastly, you need to take into consideration your life circumstances. Are you going through something really stressful? What do you actually have time to prepare? And how can you make your diet kind of fit within what you're going through in life? And so all of those factors are incredibly individualized. And so getting personalized support is probably a better way to go than just trying to follow a fad diet that you've seen in the news. And we have a bunch of resources to help you with that, to help personalize your diet plan. The first program that I want to emphasize is our lifestyle management program through our health and wellness centers. I meet with this team on a monthly basis, and they do incredible work with our members. A lot of the members who have diabetes or high blood pressure go to them for support. But actually, if you're eligible for this program regardless, so even if you don't have a chronic condition, even if you just want to lose weight or feel better, you're eligible for this program. So you can call our health and wellness centers to get set up, or call our member services, and they can forward you to the right people. Also, we have our Teledoc nutrition services so that you can access at your convenience as well. This service is pretty underutilized. I wish more of our members would use this. So if you're curious about it, now is a great time to give the program a try. And then I just want to close with a quick announcement on the dates for the health chats coming up for the following year. It'll be April 20th, May 18th, August 17th, and November 16th. Some of these topics are still TBA, so if you have topics that you want us to cover, please let us know and we'll try to work them into this schedule. And so with that, that's the end of my content for today, and I'd be happy to take any questions. And Caleb, I think you have written in, will the presentation be provided for download afterwards? They should be available on our website later on for viewing. You're welcome. Any other questions from the audience? You're very welcome, Veronica. Well, if there are no further questions, most of you have my email address. It's just dr.rosemary.ku@unitedag.org. And you can always email me personally, vegetarians. Thank you, Shobana, for this wonderful question. I was actually a vegetarian for 12 years before, so this is a question that's very near and dear to my heart. When I was a vegetarian, the thing that I struggled with the most was getting enough protein and also with B vitamins. And so if I were to, go back to being a vegetarian, I would really focus on my protein sources. Luckily for me, I don't have any soy sensitivities. So soy and other plant-based proteins are good options. Also, try to add a nutritional yeast, which has great amounts of B vitamins in there for you. So those would be my kind of the biggest tips, is focus on protein and make sure you're getting enough B vitamins. Any other questions? All right. Well, we'll probably close the health chats at this point in time. Really appreciate all of you joining us today. Hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and I'll talk to you again in the new year. Bye-bye now.